Hey, I'm so excited because we've got Nicole Cassin here, and she is a director who has skyrocketed her business and tried to not break her life on the way. Nicole, we're so glad you're here, and we can learn so much from you because am I right in thinking that growing an NDIS provider business really fast is actually quite scary?
It is very scary, and thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It
Oh,
can be super
it's
scary, but
amazing.
it can be super exciting. I guess it's just about what we're focused on.
Okay, so tell us about that because I know so many other directors in the world who are just panicking lately and have no sense of peace, no sense of, oh, it'll be right, only worry, doubt, and what's NDIS going to do tomorrow? It's like, how do you keep that sense of peace about your life when, to be honest, you're responsible for a lot of things?
Yeah, look, it can be extremely difficult. It's not a typical business that people get into where there's large profit margins. And in fact, the NDIS price guide and the way that the NDIS is set up for meeting the commission requirements versus the requirements and everything of the Shads Award and things like that. They don't all add up and they don't really speak to each other. They don't allow for things like payroll taxes and other things, let alone operational costs. So you definitely, I think, first and foremost, people in this space really are in this space due to a true passion. They either have lived experience, I find, or they've come from a space, where they really want to make a true impact. And that stems from something deep within their core and their, values and ethos. So I think, first of all, it's understanding why you're here. Yeah, so as soon as I start looking at numbers and I get really business minded, which we have to be as directors, I find that that's when I encounter the most stress and I'm the most disconnected from my business. Because by nature, I think that in itself tells you that your passions and your morals and values to do and be your best aren't usually the most viable financially. Because if you're sitting in that space and you're working from that space, you're coming from a place of genuine care. You're not thinking of the bottom dollar. But then if you have to shift yourself over where you have to in our environment and really think about those percentages and what that looks like, then you can't think about the side of the giving and the you just do because it's the right thing. And so that's where it's really hard, I think, in our industry, is that we're an industry full of people who truly have incredible values and morals and ethos, and really everyone who started a business or who works in a business, especially aspiring to be in leadership, is doing so because they typically 98% want to make an impact in the world and leave a legacy like that. And that's to me, for me, everyone has a different response to this, I bet, but for me, that is where people find the most difficulty, and that's where I find the most difficulty as a business owner in our world is value-led leadership, value-led business, viable, financially stable business, and how on earth we bridge that.
That makes so much sense. Nicole, what you're saying is so true and it's so hard because if you go back to NDIS world in say 2021, 2022, where we all had really thick profit margins, we could be so compassionate when people were having a hard time. We could have people in our programs who really weren't likely to pay. You try doing that in 2025, you go broke, and then
Yeah.
you're serving no one. And that's been a transition, and it's like, well, we didn't choose this, but it's the reality that we're in. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so for me, I guess my journey, I feel very fortunate. I started in June 2021. I started with a client off Mabel and my laptop, and I kicked off. I didn't have any investment. What happened for me was I kept annoying everyone else's businesses where I was working, and I guess I started to realize that I was the problem. I didn't know. I just thought that that was my makeup. I have ADHD and I do have a trauma background, so I have certain traits and behaviors, but I thought I was helpful bridging the gaps for other people, but actually what I was doing was trying to shift other companies' visions and solutions into what I felt was best. So what I did was I said I'll put my money where my mouth is, not to start a business. I actually just wanted to replace my own income and have power over my working days and hours. What happened was incredible, and um, through the passion side of things, because I wasn't leading from a business side, because that's not what the intent was, right? So from a passion side of things, it just went boom, 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 and really grew. Now, throughout that, I've had ebbs and flows, and I've made some huge errors, and I've been able to fix some things, and I'm still learning. I'm still getting there. But what I've learned and been exposed to through other people sharing information, other directors and stuff, is that the financial component is so, so difficult. And I, I guess for me, I guess getting right into the thick of it is that I don't look at it every day wondering how we're going to survive tomorrow. I think just that if we're doing the best we can and we're doing the right thing, incidentally, we do well. And I've had to make a really conscious decision in my own headspace and my own mindset of, do I want to be a part of the biggest business and be worrying about the bottom dollar? I was exposed to that and found that it wasn't for me at all. Bigger is not better for my type of personality and my vision and what I want in legacy. And so I just have the mindset though, if I need to get out there and do 38 hours a week of direct supports to be sustainable, I'll get out there and do my 38 hours a week of direct supports. I'll get on shift. It's totally fine. Like I love that. So it really, I get why it's so stressful for a lot of businesses. And I think it would be more stressful when you're a very data-driven business owner. Um, I guess I'm kind of, maybe some will say that's ignorant or whatever, and that's totally fine. But I'm here and I continue, with a really strong space. And I think that's because I continue to sit on the passion side of things. I don't know if
Well,
that actually answered your question.
no, it sort of does because
Yeah.
what you're saying is you do the right things, you plant the right seeds, and the right things will grow. And I think, to be honest, you've got a bit of an advantage in a lot of people listening to this. If you're in community access, your margins are way thinner. Okay,
Hmm.
whereas a lot of what you do is still that those margins are healthier at this point in time. But it's like there's this process I'm watching you describe of it's all passion, it's all like we'll make this work, and then there's this realization at some point that the numbers are actually quite tricky, but then you're not letting that destroy you. Whereas most people lose their joy there. What's happening there?
Yeah, and I definitely have in the past. I get nervous when I meet with my accountant. I have an external accountant and I trust them and they tell me what I need to be told, not what I want to be told. He lets me know every now and then, look, this is a bit thin, this is whatever. It really depends on what your driver is. For me, with my background and what I've experienced in life, I have a huge sort of story as to where I am today and the losses I've experienced with my dad and my brother passing and all those sorts of things. It gives me a different perspective on life. My legacy for my three sons is that, and I've had to learn this the hard way, people will ask me, what was your brother like? What was your dad like? And I realized really quickly that the very first sentences I say is the legacy their life left. And I never looked at it like that, right? So I used to have a bit of a gripe with my dad and there was things, whatever, when we were growing up, and my immediate response was more of a negative tone. And then just one day I kind of went, oh my gosh, whatever I say when someone asks about my dad, who's now not here to defend himself or to speak to him doing the best he could with the tools he had, is the legacy I'm like giving him for the life that he did live. And that really, really hits for me. So I have three sons, and I'm aware one day I'm not going to be here because that's the nature of the world that we live. Like, we've got a time, we're all of that. But my sons will no doubt be asked, what was your mum like? And for me, it's more important that they can say, do you know what? She just helped everyone she could help. And she had a viewpoint that everything's going to be okay. And that never came down to a dollar value or an amount of money or profit margin. So, yeah, I think I just
Wow.
got lost.
That's okay because it's the truth, and it's remarkable. I love what you're saying about the words that come into your mouth are defining reality for someone else, and that makes me think, what are the words coming out of people's mouths about where NDIS is at? Like when you think about it, we've got
Yeah.
yeah. What's going through your head there?
I just think that right now there's such a narrative that obviously it's a really incredible world from a government point of view, from a political point of view, from people with lived experience who are, now having a platform that still has a lot of work to be done for that platform to be fair, but that is starting, which is great for people with disabilities to have more of a voice and whatnot. But I do feel that the social media, even LinkedIn, focuses, especially politically right now, we've got a huge influence with things happening overseas and how that looks and what that can look like. We're about to go into vote ourselves. I find that the negative connotations outweigh the positives, and I am a glass half full person. I think, if you sort of say, yeah, maybe, that to me is a yes, we're doing it. I just see the world on that side. I'm extremely optimistic. And I think that that's a little hard for people. And I do believe that in today's world, there's a lot of stresses and the cost of living, economy, but outside of even just the financials, it's the making sure people are actually being exposed to what they deserve to have in life, especially people with disabilities, vulnerable people, and those facing adversity and other barriers. If we're so tied down on the cost of living and the cost of business and all of those things, and we're not focusing on the actual outcomes of what it does and what it leaves, you are going to be unhappy, because unless your innate core and values is to see certain figures on spreadsheets, which I don't think anybody, not even Rain Man got joy out of just seeing those numbers. He got joy out of those numbers creating a solution. Yeah. So if everybody needs that thing, so if we can get back to the core of that and back to what the outcomes are, I think it would probably be a little bit more enjoyable. For me right now, I very honestly, I'm sort of avoiding certain networking and things like that just because of that narrative. It gets my head really bogged down. I don't think it's conducive to an outcome. We have to worry about that every other hour of the day when we're running, our zero files and whatever, catching up with the accountant. That's that space over there. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of room for people to sort of reset. And whilst it is what it is, just to grab onto the core again and be focused on those outcomes and what that means.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. And I find it remarkable that we definitely have the best disability system on the planet by far,
Mhm.
and yet we are just, it's the negative narrative just consumes 90% of the space. What about the good news things? It's like Cedar going and starting a podcast of only the good things happening in NDIS. I vouch for that. It's just amazing. But I also know that it is harder for someone who's sitting in front of Zero and seeing Zero say, you're in the red right now, to have that positive outcome. But it's like, well, what steps will we take? Are we going to whinge about it? Sorry, what's
And
going
that's
through your head?
really it. If your end outcome in that environment, and this isn't, I'm mindful of what I'm about to say is
Yeah,
not
I
going to
know.
land
You and I
everyone.
both. We're okay. Yeah, we're
But
good.
I'm okay with that because I know
We're
I'm
here
not
with
for
leaders.
everyone, and my viewpoint isn't always going. And that's the thing, is that we always have to be open to hearing someone else's viewpoint and just considering and pondering if you've got room and space to to pivot or to stretch. Hence, I got shivet. So yeah, to be able to pivot or stretch into a space that isn't your usual environment. If you're sitting there right now and you've got red on your zero, you've got red on your spreadsheets and you're in the red. For me, everything is typically fixable if you're to a point. There's a point where it's actually not. You need to get, some serious professional reviews and whatnot. But if you're just starting to creep into that space, that I was breaking even for a while and now I'm not even breaking even. There are ways, and it's about being brave. And this is a huge thing for me. You do not need to be seeing that and then keeping it to yourself and holding the weight of the stress of where you're going to get your next paycheck from, but how you're going to pay your next paychecks. If you are in this space, there are incredible people, not just in our industry, but also just in general, that are out there that come from other private sector industries that have a skill set that we can really value and learn from, being such a the community sector still has a long way to go in regards to some of its learnings in, especially in the way of KPIs and business development. That private sector learning is incredible to cross pollinate, right? So I guess for me, that would be my number one message today. If you are seeing that, please reach out. I would love to have a coffee and just from an outsider's point of view, go, hey, maybe here's a way that you could bridge that. Hey, maybe you could reduce your costs here. Getting someone outside the frame to just look in when you're at this point can be so helpful. There's incredible mentors and coaches, and people are sort of suffering as such or starting to get scared and nervous, and they're keeping it so silent because in Australia we have this incredible tall poppy syndrome that sucks, and we also have a really competitive space because the margins are low. We get really competitive, and then we sort of get this crappy mindset that, oh, I can't speak to Jenny because she might steal my client. Do you know what? If that participant or client or whatever prefers Jenny's business, rock on. That means that they're going to get a better outcome. If you are that tied up going like this, trying to keep every possible thing you can, that actually speaks volumes to the core values and your kind of environment and culture. because not everyone's for everyone. And when you can get to a space to realize that not everyone is for you, you're not the best person and you're not the best leader and you're not the best company for everybody's personalities, for everybody's experiences. But you can be a really great person and be self-aware and go, do you know what? That's okay. How can I support you to go somewhere where you will feel that you can have a better outcome? And when we do that, even as directors and leaders, and we can start actually leaning on each other with some trust, I think you'd find businesses would be, by nature, just incidentally, could start improving because you would have a space to share and you would have a space to be able to really lean on other people who have been there. I've been in the red. I can say, hey, this is what put me in the red, and I can see it happening. So, all of those things I think are really important.
Yeah, and I take very seriously that, guys, Nicole has just said, if you are finding
Happy.
yourself in the red, yeah, she'll sit down with you and have a coffee with you. If you're in Melbourne, she'll have a Zoom coffee with you because you're not
I'll come to
alone.
Melbourne for a coffee. Come
Oh,
on.
okay, there we go. That's a great deal. Okay, but the thing is, like, what you're talking about there is the difference between living in absolute terror and
Mhm.
shame versus actually conquering. Now, the outcome of a conversation like that you have with a few people might be, it is time to wrap up. Like if I was in community access right now, that's a very serious conversation I'll be looking at. But generally, it's going to be the more insightful advice you can get, the better. And I remember, Nicole, going back about 10 years ago, I was director of a completely unrelated business. And I sat down with a guy and I'm like, I think I'm in some big trouble here. He said, right, well, step one, you need to phone the ATO. You need to organise a payment plan for your buzz or whatever it was back then. And he's like, step two, you need to do. And I felt like, oh, there are ways forward, you know?
There definitely are. And there are even ways forward, as you just mentioned, there's restructures and things that you can do, and they're not penalizing you. That's not to be shameful that something's in a place. I think that when we get to a place of shame, it's really a slippery slope of then hiding. And when you're hiding things, you tend to start doing things wrong. I think that's a negative, uncomfortable space to be in, but I feel it's very natural to get there.
Collaborate. And
I could talk all day.
it's
I really
awesome.
appreciate your time. And for those listening, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to share.
I think we
It
need
means
to
a lot.
get you back here again sometime. What do you reckon, Nicole?
No problem. I would happily have another chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, Nicole. With a K, you have a good one.
Thanks so much. Chat soon.
Bye.